Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here coming at you with another weekly review, this time for week 5 of the 2022-23 NBA season. There were a couple of real standout teams during the week, and you can probably guess from the thumbnail there who they are the main features of. Those sides making a really genuine run in their respective conferences, players making a genuine run towards MVP races and All-Star games as well, and really setting the tone for what is expected to be a really interesting December across the association. In other areas, of course, other teams are starting to make a bit of a move. Some are starting to settle, others really starting to fade away, and some players, starting to make a move as well, not only for All-Star contention, but certainly for All-NBA contention and maybe even MVP contention. We'll have a look at all of that and more in the review for Week 5 of the 2023 NBA season. We'll start over in the East. We'll start with the Atlanta Hawks. 2-2 on the week, 8-8 on the season. Their best performer for the week, Trae Young, 35 points, 4 rebounds, 8.5 assists, 1.8 steals on 3.5 turnovers. Good shooting splits as well. Finally, some efficiency in the Hawks. Of course, their wins came against Brooklyn, 147-145, and Washington, 136-108. Not afraid to put points on the board. They didn't mind putting points on the board either in a loss down to Indiana, 157-152. That was regulation. That's insane. And did lose out to the Celtics, 113-103. And based on how they're generating their offense, you'd have to suggest they are a poor man's Indiana Pacers right now. Indiana are currently tracking as the best offense in the history of the NBA. Now, that's all based on offensive rating. That's based on efficiency, a multitude of factors there. But if you're going to do that, you need to also have some sort of defensive presence. Now, thankfully for Indiana, they have a mild bit of that, which will probably see them win more games than they lose. The problem for Atlanta is they don't have that, so they're more inclined to lose more games than they win. Dejounte Murray has all-NBA level capacity. Dejounte Murray has all-defensive level capacity. Trae Young, all-NBA level capacity. The problem is if you're not going to apply it at both ends of the floor, you're not going to get the results. So I think at the moment they're currently a poor man's Indiana. They're a team that's really, when they're on fire and at their best, look like one of the best teams in the league. They look like a top 6 team. Outside of that, they're battling for a play-in tournament spot. Right now, I just think they're a really poor man's Indiana. Over to Boston, 2-1 on the week, 13-4 on the season after that. Jason Tatum still continuing to lead the way. Didn't have a great week efficiency-wise, but was still their best player. 27.7 points, 8.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.3 steals, and 0.3 blocks. 3.3 turnovers to go with that one. 43.1 from the field and 28% from deep. Look, if you're a perimeter player, I expect nothing less than 47% from the field. If you're going to shoot threes, at this point, you've got to be a 35% three-point shooter. 8 out of 10 from the line I'll take, but an uncharacteristic efficiency level for Jason Tatum this week. Of course, got the win against the Bucks, 119-116, and as I touched on there with the Hawks, 113-103. Did lose out to Orlando, who are certainly a team on the rise, 113-96. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of when their efficiency will return. Now, that's going to obviously be a lot better when the defense lifts, when Drew Holiday is going to be consistently in the lineup, when Porzingis makes a return. There's no doubt about it. But when they don't have guys like that, they really need to be firing on the offensive end. And currently they are struggling to do that from an efficiency level. I don't think from a total level you're really able to contest the fact that you've got guys averaging 25, 30 a game, consistently putting 30 points up, 10 assists. There's plenty of ball movement, there's plenty of scoring on offer, but they've got to do it efficiently. And if they're going to do it efficiently, it's going to allow them to lock in defensively. If they're burning energy on the offensive end, they don't have time on defense, they're just going to get burnt. And as we mentioned before with Atlanta, they are running at a really hot pace. Indiana running at a really hot pace. Milwaukee starting to fire, Orlando starting to fire. They cannot afford, and if you're going to run into Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid on a good night, you're in trouble as well. So they cannot afford to let that efficiency drop. That will improve over time when their defense continues to lift. Brooklyn 2-1 on the week, 8-8 on the season. Best player for me, Mikal Bridges, 28 points, 6 rebounds, 4.3 assists, or 1.3 steals and 0.3 blocks on 2 turnovers. You couple that with 51% around about from the field, over 50% or around about 50% from deep, and nearly 9 out of 10 from the stripe. You have an epically efficient week for a guy who has really shouldered a lot of the load and proven why he has genuinely been a vital trade piece, why he's been vital to team runs, and why he's continuing to push for All-Star selection. Defeated the Heat 112-97 and defeated Chicago 118, 109, but again, lost out to Atlanta in that absolute track meet and high-scoring affair. The question for me, though, is has the ship steadied enough for them to be a threat in the East? Because at this point, they're going to need to be a 500 team if they're going to be in the play-in. They've got enough pieces around them for anyone to step up on any one night. They can play on both sides of the floor, and they're certainly not a walkover team. Now, if they had a high-quality superstar as a number one option, and Carl Bridges as your number two, knowing what he can do, you're a top four team in the East. You're a top four team probably in any conference. But the problem is at the moment is Mikal Bridges is your number one player. And that's not a knock on Mikal Bridges. But I've been saying it for a while. This is a guy who is a key cog. This is a guy who you can build around. You know, he's not going to be your number one star, but look at what he doesn't have. Cam Thomas is a guy who can provide that relief. Spencer Dinwiddie is a guy that can provide that relief. Nick Claxton is a guy that can provide that relief. Caris LeVert, was a guy who could have provided that relief. So it's a matter of really looking and seeing. Ben Simmons is another guy I'm thinking of as well, can provide that relief. So, they've steadied enough. They can be a genuine threat when they want to be. But right now, they've just got to try and stay the distance. They've just got to try and stick fat with what they've got. If that ship steadies, genuine playing tournament team, genuine threat to the top six, just with the volatility of your Clevelands, of your New Yorks, of your Miamis, are not necessarily going to have the consistency that this team will eventually find, particularly with the role players they have. So for Brooklyn, if the ship's steadied enough, they can be a genuine threat, but I think they're really returning to be that barometer team that we expected them to be. Over to the Hornets, 1-1 on the week, 5-10 on the season, and I don't want to heap praise on this person, but Miles Bridges was their best player on the week, only the 2 games, 28 points, 10 rebounds and an assist, 1.5 steals, 0.5 blocks on 3 turnovers, efficient scoring splits, defeated Washington as they should have, lost to Orlando as expected. The big question surrounding Charlotte right now and surrounding the career potentially of this individual is LaMelo Ball and his ankle injury. Because if he's going to be a player that's consistently injured, a guy who can't be on the floor, you might get 50 games out of him in a season, but you're not going to build any chemistry, you're not going to get to the postseason. Is he going to be worth his contract? Is he going to be worth keeping around? Is it worth trying to build a team around? You've only got to look at how his brothers also had injuries. Is that a risk you've got to look at? A lot of questions to be asked of Charlotte here. And again, the story of LaMelo Ball's ankle could very well be the story of his career. If that one's not attended to and that one isn't looked at, it could be what people expected Steph Curry to eventually do. Because a lot of people didn't expect Steph Curry to do anything with the ankle concerns he had. They pretty much wrote off the fact the Warriors were going to do anything. They thought they were going to trade him out. It was nearly traded as part of the Andrew Bogut trade. Didn't happen. 4 titles later, 2 MVPs, a final MVP, the most 3-pointers ever, one of the most influential players in the history of the game, top 15 player of all time. LaMelo is obviously not measuring up to that level, but you get what I'm saying. There's the prospect of him being a perennial all-star as a $200 million guy, consistently up there in the debate as one of the best point guards in the league, and then it turns around the other side of it, and if he's got ankle injuries, that's just not going to work. So we'll see how that continues to play out, but I think it could be the story of his career if he's not careful. Over to Chicago, they were 5-10 last week. They're 5-13 this week. They're 0-3. They lost to OKC 116-102. They lost to Toronto 121-108. They lost to Brooklyn 118-109. Kobe White, their best player. It's not a knock on Kobe White, but when you've got Vucevic, when you've got DeRozan, when you've got Levine, it shows where the team's at. And he had an okay week, but it would be an okay week if he was genuinely the 4th option. 20 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Efficiency-wise, not bad. Over 47% from the field, 51% from deep, 100% from the line, less than 3 turnovers. When are they going to blow this team up? They eventually have to do something with this team. Because until they do, they're going to continue to wallow in this mediocrity. There's going to be that sense of complacency, that sense of dissatisfaction, and they're just going to try and tank. Zach LaVine clearly wants out, and his management's going to do everything they can to get him to Los Angeles. What a shock. DeMar DeRozan's not doing anything until he knows what's going on with the team. He's a veteran. That's understandable, but you're going to want to continue to build around a 35, 36-year-old who's consistently got teams to the second round. Vucevic is going to just play his role. He's consistently played his role. Probably deserves to get to a genuine contender to get out of this. Caruso's another guy that they're not wanting to get rid of, but unless you're going to pair him up, he's not going to really do much except the defensive end. Chicago just need to work out a time they're going to blow this up. They need to do something about it as soon as possible. Over to Cleveland, 2-2 in the week, 9-8 on the season. I thought Evan Mobley was consistently their best player. Again, it helps when you play the amount of games a team plays. Other guys may have played 2 or 3 games and may have had better overall lines and more production, but you've got to be on the floor to have any value. Mobley, 15.3 points, 10.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal and a block on 2.8 turnovers, a perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate right now, one of the best defenders in the league. 55.8 from the field, didn't make a 3. If you're going to take him, you've got to make him. Converted at nearly 93% from the line. So he had a nice little run there. Defeated Philadelphia 122-119. That's a nice feather in the cap. Also defeated Toronto, who are probably just that rung below them. But they did lose out to Miami, a team that they will genuinely be competing for space, and they lost by 33 points and then got defeated by the Lakers 121-115. And I think at the moment, you've got to look at Cleveland as a team that's going to be battling with Brooklyn as a genuine competitor, as a genuine player in that middle to lower part of the East. It's just a matter of where they're going to sit and what they're going to be able to do. I don't think they're any more than a 5th seed. Now, that could change with the fortunes of Orlando. That could change with the fortunes of Miami. But I think they're genuinely in that next second rung. I don't see them getting much further than a 4th seed at best if anything happens to Orlando. I don't see Milwaukee crashing. I don't see Philadelphia crashing. I certainly don't see Boston crashing. So they're going to be battling that 4, 5, 6, 7 range with Miami, with New York, with Orlando. I think that's going to be their battle. They can't afford to slip much more than that. So I think they're going to be battling, Brooklyn as well in that space. That's going to be a real battle. I don't think they're obviously a top leading team. I'd be surprised if Orlando hold on, and I'll get to them shortly. But that's really where they've got to look at themselves. They've got to assess themselves as that second tier of team. Who are they battling with that second tier of team, and they need to utilise it the most, because it could get them home court advantage in the first round of the postseason, which could see them in the second round. And after their efforts last year, they are going to want to get in the second round. There's no doubt about that. Really quick stop here for Detroit. 0-2 on the week. They're 2-15 on the season. They have not been competitive in any of their games in the month. They haven't won since October 30th. I don't know whether we're going to see them get a win. Best player of the week, Jaden Ivey. Probably the most efficient week by a leader for Detroit since, Jalen Duren had his opening week battle. 20 points, 4.5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, 3 turnovers. Not ideal, but good shooting splits. Detroit suck right now. They're the worst team in the league. Really easy to put them on the back burner. Over to Indiana, 2-2 in the week, 9-7 on the season. Tyrese Halliburton is playing out of his absolute mind right now. For me, he's the best point guard in the NBA. In a week like this, how can you argue the point? 32.3 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, 12.8 assists. Again, 12.8 assists, 32.3 points a game on 3.5 turnovers. That's pretty damn efficient for a guy with high usage percentage. 0.8 steals, 0.5 blocks. He could be better defensively. But when you're putting up that level of offensive production with efficiency, it's hard to argue. And then you go to the shooting splits. Close to 54% from the field, 50% from deep, over 80%, over 85% in fact from the free throw line, closer to that 88% mark. He is just getting it done. He is balling out of his mind right now. He may be one of 2 guards. If it was still based on guards, he would be one of 2 guards in the All-NBA first-team conversation. Him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, for me, have been the 2 best guards this season. For Indiana, 1 win against Atlanta in an absolute track meet, as we mentioned, 157-152. That third quarter by Halliburton, one of the most productive quarters in the history of the league, let alone for himself over a career. They defeated Detroit, as I mentioned. That was expected. Lost out to Toronto. They'll be dirty on that. Lost out to Portland by 4 as well. They'll be dirty on that. Could have at least been a 3-1 week, let alone 4-0. A really productive week there for Indiana. And I think the thing is going to be, can they keep pace with this historical offensive season? Because if they're not going to be able to keep pace with their historical offensive season, they're going to burn out. If they're going to burn out, no point getting into the postseason. Because you're going to rock up as a first-round team and you're just going to disappear. This is what Indiana were trying to do last year, but injuries prevented them. All of a sudden, they've got massive production out of one of the best point guards in the league. You've got shooters left, right, and centre. There's not much more they need to do right now. Nice run there by the Pacers. I'd be expecting them to want to continue to make moves. They're above 500, and I would predict that they will stay above 500. Over to the Heat. 1-2 on the week, 10-7 on the season. Jamie Jacquez Jr., their best player. And that genuinely, no offense to old Jamie there, looks like a created my player. Or an auto-generated player on 2K. The guy can clearly play, and he bust me up, and he's been busting some of the league too, so I'm not here to criticise. But that's just first impressions for you. 18.3 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal a game on 2.7 turnovers, efficient shooting splits. Miami obviously got the win against the Cavs, 129-96. Lost out the tight one to New York, and they will regret that because that is another team they will be battling left, right, and centre to try and get things done this season. Lost out to Brooklyn, and that'll be a team that they will be very close to and competing with. And the question becomes now, particularly with his development and step up this season, he's clearly one of the 3 best centres in the league for my liking. Do the fortunes of this team now sit in the hands of Bam Adebayo? He's a big guy who can score, who can rebound, who can pass, can play D. Was probably, or in my opinion, was the best player for the Heat in the NBA Finals. This is a guy who can step up. This is a guy who can get it done. And they are not the same team when he's not on the floor. That's just evident. I think Miami need to try and get him healthy. They need to try and keep him in an advantageous position. There is talk of them wanting to get some trades done to try and just boost that team over the hump again. If they're going to pick up a genuine borderline all-star or all-star player, yeah, I'd put them as a top 4 team in the East again. Along with your Milwaukee's, along with your Philadelphia's, along with your Boston's. I just think at that point experience would get you over Orlando. But right now, this team sits with Bam. And does that prove how valuable he is in the scheme of the league? Yeah, absolutely. I think it just leads more credence to a case that he's one of the 3 best centres in the league. He has a genuine All-NBA case. He's obviously an All-Star. And he may have an MVP conversation around his name at some point as well. But I think the fortunes of this team are now sitting with Bam. Bam's not healthy and not on the floor. They are not in a good space. If he's healthy, he's on the floor. If he's going for 25 and 12, a couple of defensive stops here or there, some good passing, some efficient scoring, Miami, a far better team. Milwaukee 2-1 on the week, 12-5 on the season. Really interesting week to try and pick who their best player was. I just felt that he had that impact all over the floor and was epically efficient. So how could I go past Brook Lopez? 25.7 points, 6.3 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 2 steals, 2.7 blocks, less than half a turnover a game. He had 1 turnover in 3 games of basketball. Shot 65.2% from the field, 44% from deep, 90% from the free throw line, and he continues to prove that players can evolve as the game evolves, and continues to lead credence as to why players of the past would be as good as they were, if not better, in the present. Lost to Boston 119-116. I would expect that, considering that I think Boston at this point is the best team in the East. But for Washington, they defeated Washington, a tight one, but it was expected to get the win, and did defeat Portland 108-102. And the real question is, when you look at their momentum, when you look at how they're structured as a team, when you look at the fact Giannis is getting back in control, are they set to supersede Boston on top of the mantle in the East? It's going to come down to health. It's going to come down to consistency. It's going to come down to play on both ends. But if they're looking to contribute the way they can, with Giannis dominating, with Lillard getting his points, with Middleton trying to do what he can do, with Lopez producing the way he does, this team is a real dangerous threat. A real dangerous threat. I would not want to be running into them right now if it was the postseason. You've only got to be making a run at the right time. This is certainly what they're doing early. And sure, you can argue that, yeah, Lillard's going to attract some attention on defense. Of course he is. He should. He's one of the big game shooters, one of the big shot shooters, one of the biggest clutch shooters the league's seen since 2010. That's not an insult. That's a fact. Why wouldn't he draw attention? Oh, well, it makes things easier for Giannis and Lopez. Okay, but the functionality of the team's better. That's what's meant to happen. Now, the same thing's said for Holiday, and obviously the same thing is said for Porzingis over for Boston. So it's much of a muchness. But I would love to see them battle right now in a 7-game series. I think that would be absolutely intense. I think it's something to look forward to as we head forward, because they very well could be set to supersede the Celtics if they choose to. Over to New York, one of the best teams in the East, or slowly growing. Well, certainly what their hype says, and we'll get to that in a second. 1-1 on the week, 9-7 on the season. Very reminiscent of Indiana. And for me, their best player was Jalen Brunson. Pretty easy when you see things here. And no, that's not a typo on the free throw line and the shooting percentage there. 29.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, reasonable defensive numbers, less than 2 turnovers, 61% from the field, 42.9 from deep. Reed's awesome, till you see the fact that he also shot 42.9 from the stripe. It's free, it's unguarded, it's the same shot every time, and you shot less than 50%, let alone 80%. Just a couple of questions regarding that one there. Of course, for New York, they defeated Miami 100-98. They'll keep that feather in the cap. Lost to Phoenix 116-113, and that is a good measurement of how this team stacks up. But I just want to know when their form is going to match their hype. I know they're in a big media market. I know they're one of the big founding teams and one of the best brands in sports. But these guys are talked about like they're winning the NBA championship every game. If their form matched the hype, no one would be talking about the 1970s New York Knicks. They'd be a thing, but they would truly be a thing in the past. Not sitting here 50 years later wondering when the next New York championship's going to be attained. With the way their hype's talked about, they should be, they're championship favourites. All the media can talk about when New York's on TV. All social media can talk about when they're on TV. And that's what they deliver. A 1-1 week where they barely got home against a genuinely opposing team in their own conference and couldn't get the job done against a team that beat them on the buzzer and seriously would cause some more problems for them if they're in the same conference. Just need their form to match their hype. Once their form matches their hype, I've got no issues. I tell you a team that's matching form and exceeding their hype though, and that's the Magic. 4-0 on the week, 12-5 on the season. Now, I know Banchero won Player of the Week, but I've got Franz Wagner as their best player. And you'll never guess who my Player of the Week is now that I've mentioned that. 22.8 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals and 0.8 blocks on 1.8 turnovers. They went 4-0. They were the only team to go 4-0 in the East this week. 55.9 from the field, like it. 29.4 from deep, don't like it. 71.4 from the line, could be better. But they went 4-0. They defeated Toronto by 19. They defeated Denver by 5. They defeated Boston by 17. And they defeated Charlotte by 13. Their only close game was the defending champions. And the only question I've got right now for Orlando is experience going to be too little when it comes to the postseason? Because, again, and this, I don't want this taken out of context, so I'm going to make it really plain and really clear. I do not think this Orlando team stacks up to the 90s Orlando team of Penny Hardaway, Shaquille O'Neal, Nick Anderson, Dennis Scott, but they're telling a very eerily similar story. They've got lots and lots of ability on the floor. They've got all-star level talent. They've got all-NBA level talent. They've got all defensive level talent. They're currently one of, if not the best defense in the league. They can defend old school, keeping your feet in the paint. They can get out on the perimeter. They can stop a fast break. But I just wonder if they're going to be too inexperienced come the postseason to get the job done. And that's their big question right now, because other than that, they've got the talent. It's just going to be up to experience. If that experience can supersede itself, fine. They're going to be in a really good spot. But until then, I just think, we're in the very early stages of what's going to be a very excellent run for the Orlando Magic. Over to Philadelphia, they're 12-5 on the season as well. They went 2-2 on the week though. Tyrese Maxey with another solid week. 26.3 points, 5 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 0.5 steals and 0.5 blocks. Inefficient scoring-wise, but didn't really lose too much of the ball. Again, 2-2 on the week. They defeated OKC by 4, smacked the Lakers by 44, and then went down to Cleveland by 3. Really would have wished this was a 3-1 week, and also lost to Minnesota, that one by 13 points. And I just wonder, how much is Joel Embiid going to be able to do now that he's been able to pick up that passing game? Is he going to have the ability to stick the course with his passing game? Because if he's going to be able to continue to go the distance with his passing game, then the sky's the limit for Philadelphia. Here's a guy averaging, 33 and 12 with 2.5 blocks? And then you're going to turn around and go, we want half a dozen assists out of you, and we're going to give you an all-star shooting guard to play with you, who can average 25 a game. That's a dangerous combination. I talk about Sabonis and I talk about Fox as that combination of Jokic and Murray. There's no reason Embiid and Maxey can't do that in the East. Absolutely no reason they can't do it. Embiid tracking very nicely for me in MVP consideration. Maxey, he's going to have the numbers for an All-Star. I don't know whether I personally would have him yet as an All-Star, but he's certainly going to have a case. It'll be really interesting to see how much of a case he does have on that one there. But right now, if Embiid can stay the course with his passing, Philadelphia are going to be a genuine threat. Over to Toronto, 2-2 on the week there, 8-9 on the season, so they're one game back. But what I do like is seeing Dennis Schroeder on my screen. I don't like the fact that the image hasn't been updated there, and a big shout out to the worldwide leader who haven't been able to update that one. But Schroeder, for me, was their best player on the week. 20.5 points, 2.3 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 0.8 steals on 2.5 turnovers, and really efficient scoring, particularly for a little guy. As I mentioned, 2-2 on the week. Defeated Indiana by running the score up and just beating them in a track meet. Defeated Chicago with plenty of points on the board. However, did go down to the Magic, who were really threatening as a top 4 team in the East, and went down to Cleveland, a team that would just sit a rung above them in the standings. And the real question for Toronto now, as far as them being competitive and staying within that top 10, trying to crack that top 6, certainly staying within the 10 or staying in the playing tournament, is can they sit above 500? And how soon can they sit above 500? Because the more that you're chasing to try and be competitive and get back on an even keel, the more energy you're burning. These teams we're talking about that are 13-4, 12-5, 12-6, that already have that advantage of a half dozen game lead at best, are going to look a lot better as the season goes on, particularly if they can keep up their winning ways and get 10 games above 500. Then there's no concern. But while you're constantly trying to chase, while you're constantly trying to get a result, you're just burning energy. You're doing the right thing, but you really want the All-Star break to hurry up. Well, when the All-Star break hurries up, you've already burned a lot of the tank, and then you become preserved. And when you start preserving going into the playoffs, that's when you start looking at bad results, when you start looking at resting players, and you start looking to the draft. It's not a great overall result. So it'll be interesting to see. Can they get above 500 sooner rather than later? And when they can, how long can they maintain it? Or where can it take them to? Time will only tell. Tell you what, time will tell, and that's whether Washington are going to absolutely try and do anything. 1-3 on the week, but they beat the worst team in the league. So, pat on the back there, well done. It's like beating a one-legged man in a, season. They're 3-14. They're one of the worst teams in the league. Kyle Kuzma continuing to be the best player on a bad team. Al Harrington said it best. Someone's got to get numbers on a bad side. 23.5 points, 8 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 0.3 steals, 1 block on 2.3 turnovers. I have to give him a pass on the efficiency-wise, 45.5%, 38.5 from deep, and 93.3 from the free throw line. But, again, someone's got to get numbers on a bad team. The question is, though, could they have been 3-1? Did they blow a lot of opportunities that really should have been theirs? The big question for me is, could they have beat Milwaukee that they lost by 3 points to? Could they have beat Charlotte that they lost by 3 points to? You're talking about a 3-1 week. There's a lot more positives to come out of it. But when your only win is against the worst team in the league in your own conference, there's nothing to really pat on the back about. Not something you'd really be bragging to family and friends about, I can assure you with that one there. That's how the East is currently looking right now. Top 10 of the East, the Celtics, the Magic, the Bucks, and the Sixers. Again, I think inexperience is what's going to hurt Orlando. I think the Bucks are making a run, and you cannot rule out Philadelphia. I think your top 3, the Bucks, the Sixers, and the Celtics, they'll be thereabouts. The Heat, the Knicks, the Pacers, the Cavs, and I think the Nets are going to be the true battlers in that sense of working from 4 through to 8 or 9. I think Orlando may surprise, but inexperience will probably get them. Atlanta, to me, are just overshowing a little bit. But that is where the 10 best teams in the East sit after 5 weeks of the NBA season. And, of course, he was the best player on a team that won 4 games. Franz Wagner, we've gone over him already. It's a matter between him and Banchero, and you can see it on screen there. Who's going to be the leader of this team? Who's going to be the number 1 option? Who's going to grab it by the scruff and take ownership? The question is, when they do that, who's going to get offended? Who's going to want to have the ball more? Who's going to be talking to the media? Who's going to be talking to the coach? Who's going to be talking to the teammates, the staff, everyone else around the club? trying to explain that, yep, I should be the man, or no, he shouldn't be the man, and things of that nature. The only two worries I have right now for Orlando is their inexperience, and I don't know how well they can hold out without that experience. Don't get me wrong, it's on its way, and they're a really talented team. The league is young, but they may be too young with their inexperience. And the other side of it there, will the team get disgruntled if someone puts their hand up and says, I'm the man? They're clearly a coachable team. They've clearly got plenty of upside. You do have to just wonder whether sometimes there may be a couple of fragile personalities that may cost them there. But Franz Wagner, for me, he led a team to 4 wins. The only 4-win team in the East, and my best player in the East for Week 5 of the 2023-24 NBA season. And from the East, we head over to the West, and we'll start with the Clippers. 2-2 in the week, 7-9 on the season. It's a bit of an indictment, though, when you see not that Kawhi was the best player on the team, but the way he was the best player on the team. 21.3 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1 steal, 1.3 blocks, 1.5 turnovers. Reads like a pretty casual Kawhi stat line. But when you look at the fact that he shot 41.7 from the field and 21.7 from the three-point line, it is certainly not a good look. 95.2 from the free throw line does improve. Now, they did defeat the Spurs and did defeat Dallas, but they went down to New Orleans and they went down to Denver, 2 games below 500. And you just wonder whether Russ on the bench is ever going to actually work properly. Because it's okay to put him on the bench. It's okay to say that he's going to come on in the second unit. But you're doing that and expecting him to warm up instantly. That's not who Russ is. Russ is going to play 30 minutes a game. Russ is going to run up and down the floor and get his energy about him. He's going to distribute. He's going to attack the rim. He's going to rebound. You can't just bring him off the bench for spurts of 6 minutes at a time and go, yep, okay, you're just hitting your striders. We're going to take you out of the game. Doesn't work that way. Can't work that way. Won't work that way. And I just wonder if it's ever going to work properly. I don't see it really happening, to be honest with you. I mean, good on the Clippers for trying this. And good on Jerry West for really putting up an absolute stacked roster. And no doubt he's got a card in his back pocket to try and play at some point this season. But right now, he's going to want to try and deal that from the bottom of the deck, just with the way the Clippers are going. Over to Dallas, 1-1 on the week, 10-6 on the season. They're above 500. They're in the playoffs. They're starting to get some production out of everyone there. Kyrie Irving having a nice, efficient week. Typical splits, a guy who can genuinely pour it in efficiently as a guard. One of the more efficient guard scorers we've ever seen. 27.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.5 turnovers. 50, 40, 100 splits. 1-1 on the week. Lost to the Clippers. Really didn't play well against the Clippers, but did defeat the Lakers. But you've got to wonder how do you take this team seriously? What are they bringing to the table that's so unique in this situation? You know, you've got a team that's got Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Like that's crazy to think you've got a team with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. But their efficiency comes into question. Their ball use at times comes into question. Who uses the ball comes into question. What they've got outside of those two comes into question. It's all right to be, I understand basketball's a business, and for Dallas, it's that bottom line. But the bottom line gets solved when you win. I just don't know how you meant to take a team like this so seriously. 1-1 on the week's great. 10-6 on the season's awesome. But I don't know how you meant to seriously take them as a genuine contender at any point. Just a genuine mixed bag. Does have to make you wonder. A team that doesn't make me wonder so much, though, is the Denver Nuggets. 2-2 on the week. 12-6 for the season. And their best performer was Reggie Jackson. And I love Reggie Jackson. I love the energy and the effort that he brings to all his teams. Everything of that nature. 17.8 points, 5 rebounds, 7.8 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.3 blocks. Getting the job done. Great efficiency splits. 2-2 on the week, as I mentioned. They lost to Orlando, as you'd expect, with some really low numbers and what was on the floor. Lost to Houston. Passable. I think Orlando and Houston are probably closer to each other than many expect. Defeated the Spurs, as you'd expect, and had a wonderful game against the Clippers. And you just wonder whether that 2-game win streak's enough to get them back in their groove and lead the West. And I'll touch on Reggie Jackson a little more here. Everywhere Reggie Jackson has gone, he's been a buzz player. Does he fit the starting lineup? Does he come off the bench? Can he do enough to generate? Is he too much of a liability? But there's one thing that's been consistent with Reggie Jackson his whole career. Everywhere he goes, wherever he plays, that team, in one way, shape or form, becomes better with him on it. The Clippers loved Reggie Jackson. They were better for having Reggie Jackson. OKC were better for having Reggie Jackson. And right now, Denver, with their veterans, are better for having Reggie Jackson. Might have a 3-4 week stretch where he plays 5 minutes a game, but when you need him to step up, he's out there for 35 minutes a game, and he's out there for 25, 30 points. He just gets it done, and you've only got to hear the way he talks about his teammates. He's a humble, lovable guy. He's one of those guys that's found a niche, that stays in the league, that stays in the job, that gets paid and delivers. Not much more that a team like Denver needs when they've got that on their side. Then you go to the other side of things, a team that was the absolute perennial leader of everything that was veterans, of good players, of culture. And now they've just become an absolute shell of that. And that's the Golden State Warriors, 1-1 on the week, 8-9 on the season. Best performer, Steph Curry, 25, 3 and 6. Couldn't get it done to the point where he was averaging 36 and 6 on 50, 40, 90, so they don't win. 48.6 from the field as a little guy, pretty good. Subpar when you look at his three-point shooting by standard, but we're talking about the greatest shooter to ever shoot a basketball. 100% from the free throw line. They lose to Phoenix, overpowered offensively, defeated a young, inexperienced Spurs. And yet the question for me still remains with Draymond Green and why he just can't grow up, why he can't own his actions, why he can't accept responsibility, and why he isn't adaptable. And everyone's going to use the Rodman comparison, say that Rodman didn't do that, and everyone moulded around Rodman. But all of Rodman's issues revolved around one person and impacted one person, and that was Dennis Rodman. It didn't impact the rest of the team. It didn't have this huge, overwhelming, geez, the team's no good without this. Geez, the team just falls short when he does this. Because Dennis Rodman was going to go on the floor. He was going to guard the best player at every position. You know, he's going to take Magic at point. Took Jordan at the 2. Guarded Bird at the 3. Had no problem with Barkley and Karl at the 4. And once held Shaq scoreless in a half. I think the guy could defend. And statistically, the greatest rebounder ever. But the only impact his actions had were on him and not on his team. And he took responsibility for that. Draymond doesn't do it. And I just wonder what he has over this franchise and what he has over the league to let them do it, or if it's part of that self-entitled era that just seems to be creeping into sports. Not much else to say on top of that one. Houston with a nice bounce-back week. Only played the 2 games, but went 2-0. 8-6 on the season. Jalen Green, a really, really productive week for him. 29.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals a game on around 2 turnovers. Pretty efficient when you consider 52.3 from the field. Not ideal from deep, but they're getting wins. Defeated Memphis, defeated Denver. Would have expected to defeat Memphis. They're not really doing much at all right now. Getting that one over Denver, when you consider the lineups, not a bad result. But what's the next step on their growth chart? Obviously, they need to continue to track above 500, playing at a very minimum right now. But what is that next step? What is it for Jalen Green? What is it for Alfred Şengün? What are you doing with Brooks and Van Vliet? You know, Brooks, a all defensive level player. Van Vliet, an all-star. Şengün looking like he's going to be an all-star. And Jalen Green can put in performances like this. So they've got the ability to really try and spark something. I think they're probably a veteran off actually doing something. And everyone's going, why are you saying veterans are here or there? Name a team that's ever won with no experience. Or anyone with half a brain on the squad. Every great championship team, yeah, their average age might be down and their stars might be down. But they don't win without veteran savvy or experience. And while everyone wants one and done and the next best thing, trying to do that right now in a league that's so young when you need that veteran savvy just isn't going to happen. So I just want to know what the growth is for this team. What's the next step in their growth chart? They are tracking okay, though. Over to the Lakers, 4 games on the week, 2-2, 10-8 on the season. So they're above 500, and they're sitting maybe just above where I thought they would be. I think that's a fair assessment for them. Anthony Davis with another good week, 21.3 points, 13.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists, good defensive numbers, efficient scoring. They defeated Utah. Well, they smacked Utah. Defeated Cleveland. Unfortunately, though, they go down to Dallas in a tight one and get absolutely pumped by Philadelphia. And then the question becomes, who's going to play defense except Anthony Davis? Because you can't sit there and whinge about him offensively when you don't give him touches, and then whinge about the team's defense when he's the only person defending and expending all his energy defensively and not being able to get the looks offensively. That's not how sports works. If you're going to sit there and praise up the guy for getting constant offensive stats, look at what he does on the other side of the ball. Because you can't sit there and blame Anthony Davis as the reason they lost by 44 points. There's other guys on the team that will happily heap the praise. And you know what? Full credit to LeBron. No one scored more points in the history of pro basketball in North America than LeBron James. Nobody has played more minutes in pro basketball than LeBron James. But if you're going to heap all the offensive praise on him, you need to hold their level of accountability defensively just as high. And right now, the only person with any level of accountability defensively is Anthony Davis. Just how it is. So until they're going to get a better defender next to Anthony Davis, then this team's just going to continue to sit about where they are. They'll get blown out by these teams that are good offensively. They'll get smacked by teams that will and should be ahead of them as contenders. That's just how it is. And I'd hate to see what that's going to look like against Denver, what it's going to consistently look like against Phoenix. Philadelphia are a great example. You know, I just don't know how they contend if they're not going to be able to produce defenders on both sides of the ball. Very quickly over to Memphis, 0-3 on the week, 3-13 on the season, one of the worst teams in the league. They're missing key components. And as much as I love Derrick Rose, the fact he was their best player on the week says a lot more about where this team isn't going than where it is going. 12 points, 1.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists. A rounded 12-2-2 as their best player. Lost all of their games, considerably lost all of their games, didn't crack the ton. What are they hoping to achieve this year? Because right now, it's going to be a matter of achieving a draft pick or achieving a miracle turnaround to try and restore some sort of faith in humanity in the team. Oh, and based on that season record, there are 16 games. They're still 9 away from Ja Morant being with the team, let alone being in the game. Don't know what they're trying to achieve here. Really minimum upside there for Memphis. And if you want to toss a coin and look at the complete opposite, look at Minnesota right now. 2-1 on the week, 12-4 on the season. One of the 2 best teams in the West, one of the 4 best teams in the league right now, led by one of the best shooting guards in the league in Anthony Edwards. 30 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. Good defensive numbers, good efficiency with the basketball. Exactly what a team leader needs to do, exactly what a team needs. Defeated Philadelphia, big tick in the box there. Potential finals matchup if they were to get all the way. Lost to Sacramento, that's the crucial one there they need to talk about. Because you're mixing with Sabonis and Fox, who to me are just a slightly worse version of Murray and Jokic when they're on. And it doesn't breed well to, if you go, I know it's only the regular season. I know we're talking 16, 17 games in. We're 20% of the way through the season. There's a lot more of the story of the 22-23 season to be written. But that's probably a key page in their book. Defeated Memphis. Of course they did. Everyone's beating Memphis. The other question is the old school mix back working for teams? Minnesota's a prime example of that. Big men who can play big, perimeter players who can play perimeter, and role guys who get the job done. Denver, similar. Boston, similar. Philadelphia, similar. Starting to see this reverse. Orlando with the way they play their game, similar. Starting to see a turning of the tide. Now, it does help that the best team to ever exploit the small ball is currently on an extreme downward turn. Makes plenty of difference there. I just wonder whether that old school mix is back working. We will see. We will see. But for Minnesota right now, they're tracking as one of the 2 best teams in the West. They're playing good basketball. They've got all defensive capability on their team. They've got all NBA capability on their team. They're winning. They're ticking a lot of boxes. Again, I think it's going to be an Orlando thing. I just wonder whether experience is going to be the question. But they have something Orlando don't have. They also have something a lot of other teams don't have. That's veteran savvy and veteran mix in this team. Do they have the right balance? We will see. But they are tracking very nicely. Over to New Orleans, they've had a nice real bounce back as well. 2-2 in the week, 9-9 on the season. Their best player, Brandon Ingram, had a really nice return to form. 26 points, 4.5 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 0.5 steals. Efficient scoring from the field, lacking turnovers. Would like to see a bit more from the line and a bit more from deep. But nonetheless, good overall production. Defeated Sacramento, key win there. Defeated the Clippers, key win there. Losing back-to-back games to Utah, though. They are one of the lesser teams in the West. I think it probably bodes to them, particularly on back-to-back battles. It does bode to them probably where they sit. Now, 4 games in 7 days, a big burnout. Maybe Utah just are a matchup problem, but that's something I'd want to address. That I've taken down a Sacramento team that can be playoff worthy. I've taken down a Clippers team that's tried to stack to the gills. Again, they're not in great form, but Utah's certainly not the team that I'd be wanting to suffer back-to-back losses to. I just wonder what the chemistry is going to be with CJ McCollum, expected to return very, very shortly. Of course, he's been out for around 3 to 4 weeks with a collapsed lung issue. Hope he's okay there. I know plenty of people have family that have had lung issues. They're not fun, particularly for an athlete. I can't imagine how enjoyable that is, let alone people that are just in poor health. But I just wonder what that chemistry is going to be. CJ McCollum loves taking a shot. Spoken about this for the last year and a half. He's not really a guy that should be taking 17, 18 shots. Now, when he's on, yeah, great efficient guard. One of the, there's a reason that combination of him and Lillard worked for so long as far as getting success when they can on the scoreboard, not necessarily in the win column, but on the scoreboard as a duo. But you've got Zion Williamson, one of the most efficient attackers of the rim the league's seen. Brandon Ingram, a player that consistently can put up 25 and 7. You don't need to be taking 17, 18 shots a game. I just wonder what this chemistry will look like. They're 9-9, they're at 500. They've got a little wiggle room there, but you've also had a mildly disgruntled Zion who needs to get his mojo, who needs to get him moving. We'll see how that continues to go. We'll see how that continues to run. I just wonder what the chemistry looks like there with CJ McCollum. Over to Oklahoma City, and they continue to turn the wheels, continue to turn the jets. 1-1 on the week. Not too much to talk about there on the court, at least. 11-5 for the season. Gilgeous-Alexander continuing to make a case as the best guard in the league and continuing to make a real case as the MVP this season. 35.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 8.5 assists, a steal and a half, a steal and a block, steal and a half, 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks, 1.5 turnovers a game, 50-40-90 shooting splits, defeated Chicago, lost to Philadelphia. I think that's a fairly good measure of where they're at. I wonder what the current situation around Josh Giddey is doing for the team. I'm not going to go into it. Everyone knows what's going on. There's further investigations going on. I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. But you do have to wonder when a guy with so much upside has such a situation arise for him, what that does to the team. He's one of your 3 best players. That's a lot to be going through on a team that is clearly on the rise. That right now is at a point where they cannot miss the playoffs. That is not an option for OKC right now. So they do need to lock in. But ultimately, I want to know, and I really want to understand what the impact of the Josh Giddey situation may be. Because it could blow up in their face. It could also turn out to be nothing. But it very well could blow up in their face, which could do all sorts of irreparable damage, not only for the team this season, but for the franchise. And that has to weigh a fair bit on their minds. I just wonder what the pressure is like right now for Oklahoma City. I tell you where there is no pressure though, and that's over to the Phoenix Suns. They're 4-0 on the week. They're 11-6 on the season. Devin Booker's back, and he's playing some really good basketball once again, getting back to that All-NBA first-team level that we know he can be, and that case is the best shooting guard in the league. 30.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 7.8 assists, with some good defensive numbers and efficient scoring splits as well. They defeated Portland, they defeated Golden State, they defeated Memphis, they defeated New York. The question is, can their offense overwhelm any good defense in the league right now? Because if it can, you're looking at a genuine conference final contender, along with Minnesota, along with Denver. OKC is probably the other team in other cab in that rank. This team is clearly better when Devin Booker's on the floor and when Devin Booker's getting touches. I don't want to hear any of this. Kevin Durant's a top 25 player of all time. Kevin Durant's one of the best small forwards of all time. He's arguably the greatest, he's the second greatest scoring small forward of all time. There's another guy in the league who is the all-time leader in points. 4 scoring titles of league MVP. I cannot discredit Kevin Durant. But it is undoubted for me that the best player on this team and the most valuable player on this team is Devin Booker. They're better when he's on the floor. You need him to be the shooting guard, he can do it. You need him to be the shot taker, he can do it. You need him to run the point, he does that pretty well as well. So, where do you balance him? Where do you put him? Because you have to consider him their most valuable player and where he's going to be and what he's going to do. That's a given. Absolute given. And I just wonder, with him on the floor, can their offense overwhelm any good defense? We haven't even seen them at full strength yet. But I would not want to run into Phoenix right now. They are on an absolute run. A team that's slowly trying to make a bit of a run is the Portland Trail Blazers. 2-2 on the week, 5-12 on the season. Jeremy Grant standing up again. He's having a really nice month or so of basketball. Really nice, efficient week for him as well, getting it done on both ends of the floor. Now, they defeated Utah and Indiana. I think Indiana is certainly batting above their average, or about where they need to be with Utah. But of course, they're trying to get Malcolm Brogdon back into the team. Trying to get Scoot Henderson back in the team. Lost to Phoenix, no shock there. Lost to Milwaukee, no shock there. About where they need to be, depending on where they caught Indiana as well. I mean, you're going to look at that. Realistically, could have been a 3-1 week, particularly with a competitive game against Milwaukee. I think right now, though, they need to look at Jeremy Grant as a viable number 1 option on this team. He's put in the hard work for the last 3 weeks with and without people on the floor. Needs to continue to do it. Proving to be a really key cog. Proving to be a really valuable asset. Who's getting it done and getting it done efficiently. I think if you can start to really centre this team around him and just see how it goes. Try it for a month. The last 2 or 3 weeks he's produced. He's been healthy. He's been on the floor. I think you just take a risk with it. What have you got to lose in a rebuild season? Try a few things. You've got Anthony Simons out injured. Have a dip. See what happens. I think they can try and test him as a number 1 option. Now, he's not going to be a championship-leading number 1 option, but not a bad start for a rebuild. I think it's someone they can certainly turn their focus to. Sacramento, 1-1 on the week, 9-6 on the season. And they've just lost a little bit of momentum here or there. De'Aaron Fox with a really nice week. 31 points, 4.5 rebounds, 8 assists, 1 steal, 2 turnovers, efficient scoring for a little guy. Getting it done. They lost to New Orleans, which isn't ideal. Got the win against Minnesota. And they've just got to find their mojo. When they're playing their best basketball, they're consistently up and down the floor. They're running breaks. Everyone's up and about. When they start being stagnant and can't get on a roll, that's what really affects their run. And that's what hurts them as a playoff team. As a playoff team, they're going to really need to consistently get on runs, consistently get on wins. They can't get into a backwards and forwards, win here, win there, win here, win there, because they won't win a playoff series. They're a good enough team to make a conference final, but if they don't get their run on and don't get their style of play, they're not going to win a game. That is just as simple as possible. They're a team that needs flow, that needs their mojo. Right now, they don't have it. Just wondering when they regain it, and when they do, can they continue to keep that balance? It's as simple as it gets for Sacramento because they've got all the pieces. Obviously, the defense needs to be there, and I think that's what's going to be key for them in trying to get that mojo back. You need to be able to get stops on both ends. So you might not be getting an offensive run, but let's get a couple of stops on the defensive end. It's all right if we don't score, but we can't bleed points. And right now, in order for them to do that, okay, we're not scoring, okay, but we've got to stop. We're a chance to get ahead here. Okay, we've got to stop. We've got a chance to get ahead here. That's not happening right now. Oh, we didn't get a basket, and we gave up points. Oh, we didn't get a basket, and we gave up more points. And that's when they start to really have those issues. So, for me, I just think they need to work on getting their mojo back, getting their flow. It's what makes them a better team. Over to San Antonio, they're fledgling. It's as simple as that. 0-3 on the week, 3-14. They're one of the worst teams in the league. Wembanyama, massive week, no doubt about it. Tried to put himself back up as Rookie of the Year. 22 points, 11.7 rebounds, 3 assists. Dominant in the stocks department. High turnovers, though he is a rookie. This is probably, as he said, the worst version of Victor Wembanyama we're ever going to see. Which is scary to think the worst version of Victor Wembanyama is around at 22, 12, and 3 with 3 steals and 3 blocks. On 95% from the free throw line. I think they've really got to worry about, though, just getting a veteran in. I continually harp on about it. I'm not going to stop harping on about it because successful teams aren't purely built off the strength of just a young core. There needs to be a veteran level of experience on the team to have success. And there needs to be someone here that's going to guide this team. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of young guys running around and them trying to focus on themselves. Get a young guy in. Get a veteran in. And try and make something of this squad. Try and mould them, boys to men. Then you'll see the results. And finally, over to Utah. 2-2 on the week, 6-11 on the season. They had a really mixed bag, and I think that's represented by the fact that I thought John Collins was their best player. 12.8 points, 6.8 rebounds, 0.5 assists, 0.3 steals, 0.3 blocks. So efficiency. But right now, the thing that's getting them done is that even spread of scorers and chemistry. When they get the even spread of the score, they're able to deliver more. They just look like a better team, and they're able to get things done. And there's no real standout star right now. Clarkson hasn't been able to consistently put it together. Markkinen not consistently putting it together. And that's what's really hurting this team. They need to maintain an even spread for chemistry. Lost to the Lakers, got belted by Portland. They defeated New Orleans and only just snuck over against them in their second game as well. So they'll take the 2 games there, but could have been 1 and 3. We're talking about a completely different team at that point. I just think they need to continue to keep that consistent play amongst one another. It's the only way they're going to do it, that even balance of chemistry to try and get things done. Top 10 in the West, the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Nuggets and the Suns. I don't think you're going to see too much change on that all season, to be honest with you. The Mavericks and the Kings, yeah, I think the Kings will probably jump a little bit. I think the Mavericks and Rockets will probably be thereabouts. The Lakers just continue to sort of show promise, but then they fall away. Pelicans and Warriors are probably the last 2 teams battling. Outside of that, the West is pretty much wrapped, and we're only 20% of the way. Injuries could change things. Trades could change things. I don't see too much else happening. Clippers, maybe. They're the only real team outside that can see potentially making a move, but right now, your top 4 teams for me are genuinely the best 4 teams in the West, and I think the Kings are the 5th. Not reflective right now, but I think they're the 5th. Finally, player of the week. We outlined it before. His dominance, the game winner, as you can see, fading away over New York and their bench in Madison Square Garden. Devin Booker, 30.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 7.8 assists. You saw the numbers before. Led them 4-0, 34 minutes a game. Played all 4 games. This dude can take the big shot. This dude can control an offense. This dude makes his team better. This is why he's been in all NBA contention for half a decade now. It's why the Suns made the NBA Finals. People don't want to talk about it, but it's why they made the NBA Finals. It's why they were genuinely competitive in that Finals. It's why that went 6. It's why they were up 2-0. He's the only guy left from that run. Really simple stuff there. Devin Booker just continues to prove why he is the most valuable Sun. He's the reason they will have any success this season. And I love what Kevin Durant's been able to do, but they are not a better team when only Kevin Durant's in that lineup. And they've been able to get things done when Devin Booker's only in that lineup. And I think that says a lot. But he was my player of the week for week 5 of the 2023-24 NBA season. And that wraps it up. My review for the week 5 of the 23-24 NBA season. Thank you for tuning in. There's still a lot of basketball to play. We're about 20% of the way, but still some interesting stories shaping up across the season. That's been me, guys. I'm out.